welcome and all that stuff. This is the third part of my Zelda-thon. We looked at the two NES games, and now it's time to bump up a generation with Zelda: A Link to the Past for the Super Nintendo. So as a lot of you know, not many people were happy with the change of gameplay from Zelda 2. The side-scrolling and the magic system were mostly to blame because it simply wasn't what was expected from the first game. It was a case of Nintendo trying something different but ended up being backfired by adoring fans. With that in mind, does Link to the Past bring life back to the beloved series? Let's find out. The story starts off with Zelda telepathically messaging Link of her capture in Hyrule Castle. I'm guessing that's one of her powers now. God help her if there was a bad connection. Please help me, Link. I'm being held captive inside a castle. They've done horrible things to me. What? I can't hear you. How do I even get a signal with this thing? Link's uncle sets out to go look for Zelda and tells Link to stay put, but he disobeys because, well, the game wouldn't go any further if he did. Link sneaks into the castle and finds his uncle severely wounded, but his last few words inform Link that he's the new hope and entrusts him with a sword and shield. So you go around slicing a few guards and eventually you do find Zelda. After helping her escape, you're told by men in the sanctuary that a wizard named Agnem plans on breaking a seal made by 7 sages, which its main purpose was to trap Ganon in a once peaceful world known as the Golden Land, that's now been turned into a dark world, run by the Hawk himself thanks to the power of the Triforce. The only way Agnem is able to break the seal is by sending each of the sages' daughters, including Zelda, into the dark world, and it's up to Link to stop him. Immediately you're able to see that the gameplay goes back to the same routine as Zelda 1, where it's a top-down view and given a few tweaks. First of all, well, for some of you this might be a bad thing, but there still is a magic system. Alright, just let me explain. Unlike Zelda 2, the magic system is a bit different because it's only needed to use certain items like the lantern and the elemental rods. Now there are still certain spells that you're able to perform, but they cost a lot of magic to use, and quite frankly I don't use them that often. Another thing that's slightly different is Link's new spin attack, which I never use. Looks cool though. But the biggest change of all has to be Link's movement, and it is so much better. In the first Zelda, you were only able to go in 4 directions, vertically and horizontally. Link to the Past, however, now allows you to move any way you want to, and it is a huge improvement. Link in general just doesn't feel anywhere near as stiff as his NES counterpart. The only problem I have with him is that he's just a little too slow. But after a bit of time, you'll get the Pegasus boots, which allow you to move quickly in one direction. I would have liked him more if you were allowed to go any direction you want, but hey, you can't win them all. The dungeons have also been given a significant change. Instead of having to move from one little room to the next, the dungeons are a lot larger in space and items are now collected through treasure chests, something we're going to be doing in Zelda games through on out. As well as having the return of maps and compasses, there are also big keys you've got to get where they simply get through locks and treasure chests that small keys won't be able to get through. Items making a comeback from the previous 2 games are the bow and arrows, the bombs, the boomerang, and the flute, once again allowing you to transport yourself across the world. There are a crap ton of new items in this game, with a lot of them never appearing in any other Zelda game after this one. In fact, there are so many items that I'm not even going to bother listing through them all unless you want this review to go on for another 5 minutes. The only items that will become a staple in the series are the hookshot, the hammer, and the empty bottles, where you can carry fairies and potions that'll both heal you and refill your magic. I really would have liked to have these in the first 2 games, and I'm so glad they're still around even in Zelda games today. Hell, a captured fairy can even heal you when you die. That's pretty damn useful right there. What we'll also see in future games are pieces of heart. When you collect 4 of them, it'll create a full heart container, which will once again increase your health by 1 heart. Like Zelda 1, you're also able to upgrade your swords to increase your attack damage, with the strongest one apparently throbbing in your hand. Getting back to the story, the only way Link is able to defeat Agnem is to collect 3 pendants to prove that he's worthy of wielding the also stapled Master Sword. Coincidentally, after obtaining the sword, Zelda is captured again by Agnem, and thus having you to go to the roof of Hyrule Castle to take him on. Before that though, we see that Agnem has succeeded in sending Zelda into the Dark World along with the rest of the maidens, and after defeating him, Link is also sent to the Dark World, where the enemies are a lot stronger and take more hits to kill. Be prepared to die quite a number of times in this place. I cannot tell you how cheap the enemies can be when you start off in the Dark World, and like the first 2 games, it's because of the damage they do. When you first come here, the enemies will take off like 1/3 of your health in just 1 hit, and it becomes so annoying. The goddamn Dark Nuts and Wizrobes aren't even that threatening in this game. When in the Dark World, it's then Link's job to rescue each of the 7 maidens in between each dungeon. You're able to travel between the Light and Dark Worlds by using a magic mirror that you'll also need to search for hidden secrets and to solve certain puzzles when getting to the dungeons. The mirror itself works fine, but it's incredibly irritating when you end up in the wrong spot when going to the light world because you have to waste precious seconds going back to the dark world just to take a couple of steps where you have to do it all over again. Graphically speaking, this game looks great on the Super Nintendo. The amount of detail that's been put into each sprite is spectacular. It manages to keep a cartoon-like feel without it being too kid-friendly, and that's how a lot of games should be. The music also sounds good. While there still isn't that much variety, it's definitely more so than the other two games. But I will say this now, you will get sick of the dungeon and overworld theme. I mean, it's great that the main Zelda theme comes back, but it really overstays its welcome in this game. As for the progression, because of the game having the whole light world dark world concept, I've completely forgotten how much backtracking there is in this game. Yeah, I know it's a non-linear game, but the amount of times you have to go back and forth gets really tiresome, and it also doesn't help when you're trying to get all the collectibles because you have to keep changing between worlds. Some of the dungeons can also be a pain in the ass, like this one in the Dark World Forest where there are multiple entrances and exits and you have to choose the right one in order to proceed. And this ice palace could go screw itself. The bosses once again are much better than the first game. While maybe one or two are pretty easy, a large majority of them are a decent challenge. And unlike Zelda 2, if you die, you start back at the dungeon entrance again. So after rescuing the final maiden, Zelda herself, she and the rest of the descendants break the barrier around Ganon's lair, allowing us to go inside and make bacon out of him yet again. But as it turns out, Agnem has been waiting for Link at the top of the tower, and you have to fight him a second time, which is surprisingly easier than the first battle. After defeating him again, we find out that Agnem was actually Ganon's alter ego as he turns into a bat and flies away. Yeah, you can do that now, and we never see him do it again in any other Zelda game after this. Anyway, Link chases Ganon to the Pyramid of Power, which holds the Triforce, and they duke it out with one final battle. Which actually isn't that hard at all. It's certainly more difficult than it was in the first game, but not by much. Like last time, it is required that you get the silver arrows, and if you don't have them, then tough luck for you. In no time at all, Ganon will explode and you can now touch the Triforce to make everything go back to normal. Which leads to this incredibly long epilogue sequence where you see what happened when you saved the world. Link to the Past was definitely a step up from the previous two games, but do I think it's the greatest Zelda game? No. I do like it that this game actually has a map and that most of the secrets aren't cryptic and you can just easily talk to townspeople as well as a fortune teller. And I also like the overall design so that it felt like a Zelda game. But the backtracking isn't fun at all, and to be honest, I felt that some of the moments were a little boring. There isn't really much strategy into killing the enemies with the exception of one or two, and the final boss was so piss easy that it hurt. It didn't hurt me so much in the first game because all the other bosses were easier compared to Ganon. But in this game, the bosses are actually a decent challenge, and it just pains me that they build all this suspense and it turns out that the final boss can be beaten no problem. Like the SAX in Metroid Fusion. So overall, while I do like this game, I feel as if it could have been better, and I definitely don't agree with those people who think that this is the best Zelda game ever. Or even the best Super Nintendo game ever. Link to the Past for me gets an 8.5 out of 10, standing for fun but can be tedious. But it's definitely worth a try, and is a must-own for any SNES collector.
Dear God, finally got that game done. But, as a quick bonus, let's take a look back at Zelda 1, because I think it may have been a little generous with the score.
I've already discussed the problems I have with this game, so I don't think I'll need to say much. Now, the original score I gave it was a 7.5 out of 10, and I even stated that I thought it aged well. I do think this game was good for its time, but in terms of it aging well, that's definitely incorrect. For one thing, Zelda games nowadays make it clear as to where you need to place a bomb because there's a crack in the wall. However, in Zelda 1, there is no indication at all, and there are even a few moments where it's required to bomb into places that aren't even in the dungeon maps. Speaking of maps, that's another thing I don't like about this game. Apparently, there was actually a map of Hyrule inside the game's box when it was first released. So why did they just make a built-in map? I don't know about you, but I never have a good time having to look up a map on the internet just to figure out where the hell I need to go next. To me, games just need to be clear when asking me to progress further. Give me information. I can't help anyone or anything if I don't know what to help them with. This game doesn't give you any guidance whatsoever, and it becomes a huge waste of time having to run around everywhere for several hours only to find out that you would have never guessed where to find the thing you're looking for. I really don't understand why a lot of people praise this game so much. Don't take it the wrong way, I still think this is an okay game, but with so many people calling it the best NES game ever made, that's just outright wrong. There are so many problems with this game, it's unbelievable, and I hate to admit this, but even though Zelda 2 changes a few things, it doesn't have a map at all, some of the aspects I think are actually improvements over the first game, like the bosses and the magic system, thus making it a bit of a better game in my opinion. Not as good as Link to the Past, but still a better game than this. I'm sorry guys, but I'm afraid I'm gonna have to change the score to a 6 out of 10, standing for decent, although overrated. You'll be glad to know that this is the last Zelda game for now that I'm going to be beating to death with complaints. And the final Zelda game we're going to look at is on the Nintendo 64, the first 3D game to ever hit the series. You all know the one I'm talking about. Concluding the Zelda Marathon is Ocarina of Time.